People that do autopsies, what's the weirdest thing that you have found that didn't have anything to do with the person's death? Pennies. Hundreds of pennies, nearly $6 worth inside the skin all over the arms and legs. Deceased was a hermit, lived alone, ordered out for every meal. Apparently he'd been surgically implanting pennies in his skin for years. No effing clue why. I worked as a pathology assistant. My boss once found a 6-inch builder's nail in a chap's thigh. He died on site after an accident, but the nail was all healed over, even where it had nicked the bone, so it must have been there a few years. UK gang member's mother died of a heart attack during a home invasion. Aggravated burglary, 87 years old. Gang had burst in looking for drugs and money. No signs of assault, but the circumstances required a full examination to be sure nothing suspicious had occurred. During the post-mortem, 2 ounces of smack found in her anus. Back in the 90s, I worked for the company that was contracted to move bodies for the coroner. We picked up the body of a lady who had worked as a tailor in her youth. When they did the post-mortem, there were several dressmaking pins and needles under her skin, mainly in her legs. There was also a pin lodged in her lung. Coroner thought she must have inhaled it. She'd suffered a pulmonary embolism back in the 60s which had forced her to retire. Maybe the pin was the cause of it. How she hadn't felt the pins, or that none of them had been picked up on x-rays, or scans she'd had in later life, I don't know. Cause of death was a stroke. I was once in a mental health facility for only a short amount of time, and I met a woman whose daughter passed away from a drug overdose and had been upset at her for selling her grown mother's necklace for what she thought was drugs, but when the autopsy came back it was found in her stomach. Apparently she was swallowing the same necklace for years, and I can imagine why someone would do that. Rolls of dollar bills inside the vaginal cavity. Removed it and let her property dry and then returned to the family with the rest of her belongings, so wash your hands after handling money. Edit, maybe 50 bills, but can't remember if they were singles or large bills. Cause of death was an overdose, I think, but not sure. I was volunteering at the coroner's office and the doc pulled a very large, intact avocado pit out of a man's stomach. We all kind of looked at it and went, huh. Cause of death was a heart attack. While completing the post-autopsy repair for a gentleman, I found a plastic ladle tucked under the ribs. It was probably left by some poor autopsy technician who got yelled at for losing the good ladle. I offered to send it back to the coroner, but they never returned my calls. There are the normal abnormal things like extra spleens, extra ureters, surprise tumors, and swallowed foreign bodies. The record holder was $6.25 in assorted change. The one that wins is the Sharpie in the bladder, with the cap on. I was the one that got to explain what sounding was to the resident and lab assistant. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a weird thing, but once during an autopsy, I had just put the body onto the table on their stomach and the person had explosive poop. Luckily, the doc who was standing right beside them moved in time, or else they would have been shot with poop. We didn't think it was ever going to stop. When I was a student, I saw an autopsy of a man who had hanged himself. When we checked the main arteries in the heart, he had a huge blockage. He was basically just about to have a huge heart attack, so probably would have died anyway. Sorry, pretty grim. Edit, sorry for my poor grammar, guys. I've corrected this. 5 years ago, an autopsy I viewed, the patient was put down to have died from post-surgical complications from a colostomy. Infection lead to sepsis and ended with MOF. When they began the examination and looked, they found some surgical tweezers left behind, which was attributed to being cause of the infection because of how tucked away they were. I am unaware of what happened afterwards, but it was definitely referred higher. Incidental finding of a toothpick lodged in the small intestine. Spoke with a pathologist at a conference. During her training at the medical examiner's office, they were doing an autopsy on a body that was found by a river. They did a CT and something looked funny about his gut. When they opened him up, his stomach moved. It was a snake that had burrowed inside his body. It struck and bit one of the techs before they realized what was going on. Brain aneurysm in a late 20s girl. Had a tattoo directly above her pubic region that said "stay off the grass." only tattoo on her body. Also had a full-blown trichomorsor. Same patient. We saved it. No history of mental health issues or seeking treatment for any mental health disorders. Just enjoyed eating her own hair. Running into the occasional penis pump implant was also a fun one. Other causes of death, impending ones. Malignancies that weren't diagnosed, hepatitis, occult bleeding, etc. Once found full-blown metastatic stomach cancer in a college kid that died in a bar fight that escalated. It was pretty remarkable. A professor was explaining to us the brain's ability to compensate and said there was a case, I believe the person had died of old age, of someone missing an entire hemisphere of the brain. In its place was one big tumor. There were no signs of symptoms of this throughout the patient's lifetime. My friend does this autopsies and he said that he found 24 screws in the large intestine of a 75-year-old woman. The weirdest part is she died of a heart attack while in the shower. There was no possible explanation other than she was suffering from pica. I was an assistant back in the day and once a man who died in drive-by was brought and when examined we found that he had coke in his ass. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more daily Reddit videos.